Welcome, everyone, to Jason's Amazing Race Recap 37, episode number 9. Thanks for joining and listening to me babble on about the Amazing Race. And on this episode, I'll discuss episode 9 of season 37 of the Amazing Race. I know you're ready, so let's get started. I'm your host, Jason Mogul. On the last leg, Brett and Mark arrived first to the pit stop, with Melinda and Erica coming in last. The mother-daughter team just couldn't keep up with the others, despite taking taxis around the city of Sofia, even though the clue told them specifically not to. They were eliminated, leaving 5 teams to compete for the $1 million prize. After arriving at the pit stop in the previous leg number 8, teams used the Expedia app to book a hotel room for themselves, and then used it to book airline tickets to Naples, Italy. Phil explained that it was the first time in Amazing Race history that they went to Naples. In order, all other teams then also went through the same booking process with Expedia, touting how easy and simple the app was to use, taking time to support a major sponsor of the show. But this process eliminated all of the drama of getting tickets and then trying to get better tickets that we're accustomed to from past Amazing Race seasons. I guess that was the whole point of using the app. Brett and Mark tore open their clue at 12:17 a.m. and departed to the airport. All teams then followed and joined up together on the floor of the terminal while they waited for their flight. Josiah explained to the others that they had to walk on hot coals to get their express pass, with Alyssa showing them her burnt and blistered foot. At this point, I was thinking about how Carson and Jack and Han and Holden got so far behind the others, but were able to survive. They were still 3.5 hours behind the leaders when they left the pit stop. But at the airport, all teams were essentially equal, and all teams would be on the same flight. How is that fair to the other teams, that Carson and Jack and Han and Holden were now essentially equal to them in placement? There may be logistical reasons why the producers insert equalizers into the race, but my thought is that teams do pay a price when they get so far behind. But the Amazing Race doesn't hold that against them forever. But now the slate is wiped clean, and it is a new race again. Any one of the teams can still win. After flying only about an hour and a half from Sofia, teams landed in Naples and found marked taxis that would take them to a funicular, which would then take them to a fort overlooking the city. It was high above the city with spectacular views. Naples made an immediate great impression just minutes into the episode. Josiah said he didn't speak Italian, but instead spoke Spanish in an Italian accent and hoped for the best. All teams made it onto the funicular, going up. Once they got off the funicular, teams raced uphill to find their next clue. It would be the start of lots of running and hills and stairs that day. You know how I like my hills and stairs on the Amazing Race. After receiving their next clue at the top of the fort from the city's Il Capitano, which is a character from Italian theater who often boasts about his military prowess to hide his true timid nature, teams are off to find a statue of Pulcinella and rub his bronze nose for good luck. Pulcinella represents the simple man who is witty, mischievous, and who faces challenges with a smile. He is a symbol of the city of Naples. Teams had to take the funicular back down to search for the statue. Jonathan and Anna and Han and Holden were in the lead and were able to get on a funicular together, leaving the other teams to take a later funicular. But once off the funicular, they had trouble navigating to the statue. It was Brett and Mark who found the statue first and got their next clue to the detour: mandolin or mozzarella. Mandolin required one team member to assemble a mandolin while the other team member inserted the strings. It was an assembly task that required attention to detail and steady hands. Mozzarella required teams to form lumps of mozzarella cheese into 6 twisted braids that weighed between 250 and 350 grams each. It was a food prep task And you know how I feel about food prep. Those kinds of tasks usually take longer to do than it initially seems. Teams seem to like food prep tasks, but I would have picked mandolin, personally. Carson and Jack and Brett and Mark selected mozzarella and began working. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Anna and Han and Holden continued to flounder as they tried to navigate the city to the statue. They were falling behind in last place, but Jonathan was concerned they might lead the other team straight to the clue. He didn't realize the other teams were ahead of him. They finally did find the statue, and he and Anna picked mandolin. All other teams picked mozzarella. After a few attempts, Carson and Jack finished first and left to find Vico to Monte Santo, which is a specific address in a narrow alley in Naples. Brett and Mark were close behind. At mandolin, Jonathan and Anna worked well together and did well to complete the instrument. Alyssa and Josiah made their 6 braids as Han and Holden looked on in a daze. They really struggled with this task. Jonathan and Anna arrived in the alley first. The task involved a homeowner lowering from their balcony to the ground a bucket by rope. The bucket contained a shopping list written in Italian and some money. Teams had to take the list, find the right shops, purchase the items, and return them to the bucket. The homeowner would then lift the bucket back up, check it for accuracy, and then lower the next clue in the bucket. It required teams to find 3 different shops to get all the items. All teams, except Han and Holden, found the alley, and they passed by each other as they gathered the items from the shopping list. Jonathan and Anna finished first, then Brett and Mark, and they next had to find a marked taxi which took them to a pizzeria. At the pizzeria, one team member had to make a pizza by hand and fire it in a brick oven. It took skill to have it turn out just right. It was Brett and Mark and Carson and Jack who arrived at the restaurant first. Shortly after, Jonathan and Anna arrived. Anna revealed she once had a job making pizzas at Domino's. Now, many times in the past, people have talked about how good they would be at a task due to some past experience, only for us to see them fail miserably. But in this case, Anna really was good at it. You could tell she was not kidding. She knew all the little tricks, like putting flour on the paddle to prevent sticking, and how to rotate the pie in the oven to cook it evenly. She was in and out in a flash. And off she and Jonathan went, with pizza in hand, to find Phil at the pit stop at the top of a huge, ginormous castle. But Carson continued to struggle at making pizzas. Alyssa and Josiah arrived, and Alyssa had some issues too. To adjust her pie in the oven, she stuck her arm in the oven, shocking the staff, but she pulled it back out quickly when she realized the danger. Now she had singed arm hairs to go along with her burnt feet. That pizza was no good, it just fell apart and made a huge mess in the oven. Outside the restaurant, the team members who did not make pies were fed the rejected pizzas, making them very happy. They even had drinks. Those inside making pizzas seemed annoyed by the mini party outside. Meanwhile, Han and Holden worked their shopping list. They got the items from the first shop, but the shopkeeper either wouldn't or couldn't help them with the other items. He didn't even tell them what the items were. Han and Holden were frozen in puzzlement. But they overcame that and were on their way to the restaurant far behind the others. Han almost seemed glad they were behind the others because she said they performed better on their own and didn't fall victim to groupthink. Brett finished his pizza in second place, but Carson really struggled. His pizzas were either too small or too square or too something. But Alyssa got her next one right, and she and Josiah left for the pit stop. Han and Holden arrived at the restaurant, and Han did her best to catch up to Carson. She was successful on her first pizza. At the pit stop, it was Jonathan and Anna who arrived first, to a band playing behind Phil, winning a trip to Mexico City. Brett and Mark were second, with Alyssa and Josiah in third. Those two arrived very winded and tired, and shared bad puns with Phil. It was a foot race to avoid elimination, but Carson and Jack were able to keep ahead of Han and Holden to finish fourth. It was Hahn and Holden who arrived last, but in yet another surprise this season, Phil told them it was a non-elimination leg, allowing them to race another leg. Earlier in the episode, when Phil explained where the pit stop was on this leg, he didn't say anything like he usually does about the last team to check in here may be eliminated or will be eliminated. He just didn't say anything at all about it. I should have caught that, but I didn't notice it, and it was a clue that this was a non-elimination leg. It was the first non-elimination leg since season 33, leg 9. Phil also didn't mention anything about a speed bump in the next leg, so we'll see if Hahn and Holden have a penalty to face as a result. Personally, I like to see a couple of non-elimination legs during a season. Non-elimination legs do extend the season, but they also add an element of luck to the race. Oh, and did you notice how many times the racer said "Grazia" during the race? I did. So much so that I was getting annoyed at hearing it so often. In fact, I went back and counted how many times I heard it. There were 118 "Grazias" during the hour-and-a-half show. Even Phil said it once. Jonathan and Anna, they had a strong leg. They performed well together, and the tasks seemed to fit their skill set well. But will that continue into the next leg? The preview seemed to show some conflict between them again. Brett and Mark also did well in their quiet way. They were top contenders for sure. Alyssa and Josiah still have their express pass. That could prove key in the next two legs, and Josiah is now aiming for first every leg, not just top 3. He's becoming more focused. Carson and Jack continue to struggle at navigation. That seems to be their weakest skill. If they have a good day at navigating, they could move to the top again. I know this is such a minor thing, but if you recall, I noted in an earlier episode that Carson and Jack only had one backpack between them. They definitely traveled light. They have yet to even mention that. But I wondered who was carrying that backpack all this time. Looking back at past episodes, it looks like they switched off and on who did it, even within legs. I would be curious as to their decision-making process on how they decided who would do that. Did they just get tired and decide to switch, or was there some set pattern that they had already prearranged? I was just curious about that. But it was Hahn and Holden who fared the worst. Despite starting off well at the funicular, they just kept falling further and further behind the others until it was almost too late. And what about Naples? I didn't know that much about the city before this episode, so I learned a few things. It was colorful and alive, full of charm and tradition. And will there be a memory challenge in the finals? If so, what will it be? Perhaps something I've already talked about on this podcast, but just don't know it yet. I keep looking for a common item from each leg that could be used in a puzzle, but I haven't found one yet. And with that, then we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks for joining, and tune in next time for Jason's Amazing Race Recap 37, episode number 10, and maybe we'll get some answers to those questions. See you then.